Hello everyone, hope all of you are doing good. So let's start with a very important topic, perspectives on the Indian national movement, okay? This is very important for the examination because it has been asked almost every alternate year, all right? So let's see what are the constituents that you have to study in this particular theme. So firstly, that you need to understand that there is no finality on how the Indian national movement has to be understood. Okay, different movements, different perspectives add diversity to the understanding of the Indian national movement. So its very nature, okay, remains a matter of debate and contest. So the first view obviously is by the colonial perspective, and the colonial historians criticize the idea of India as a nation. They do not accept that India ever consisted of a nation, and they said it is the British rule, okay, that they called it like a benevolent despotism, that it is the goodness of the British rule which is the instrument for India's further progress. Otherwise, India has always been disunited at multiple levels, okay. So they never accepted the idea of India as a nation, and always considered that it is the British rule which is the key instrument in the benefit of India's further progress and unity. All right? Then comes the nationalist perspective. The nationalist perspective firstly criticized the colonial perspective, and they say that even during the ancient times, from then, the idea of India had always existed. On the other hand, certain national historians say that yes, India is a nation in making. Some say that no, the idea of India always existed. So within the nationalist perspective, there are two divides. One is the moderates, who also believe in the justness of the British rule. And on the other hand, it is the extremist nationalist who says that no, India has always been united, and the idea of India as a one nation always existed. And they believed in the capacity of masses to sacrifice, okay? Then comes the Marxist perspective. The Marxist perspective is not a monolithic perspective, okay? So it is divided into the, one school of thought says it is class determinism, economic determinism. It gives a very narrow approach. On the other hand, within the Marxist tradition, they say that no, even ideas, even the intellectuals in the Indian national movement, the leaders, the Congress party, all of this had been devoid of any kind of class-based characteristics. So Marxist perspective is also divided into two variants in that way, and there are different scholars in both the perspectives within the Marxism, okay? And the Marxist perspective is very critical of both the colonial perspective as well as the nationalist perspective. Then comes the socialist perspective, okay? Socialist perspective says that a political revolution is not enough. It is effectively within the Congress Socialist Party, the Ram Manohar Lohia had given the idea of 7 revolution, okay? And these 7 revolutions are also very important if India really needs to come out. So only the political revolution will not help. And even Jayaprakash Narayan also talks about partyless democracy, okay? So this is what is needed for India. And this is how the Indian national movement should have been viewed in this light, okay? Then comes the Dalit perspective. So the Dalits, in the Dalit perspective, certain scholars believe in the justness of the British rule, but Ambedkar has been also holding some critical attitude towards the Brahmanism, towards Hinduism as an ideology. And he does not believe that India as a nation exists. He says it is a segmented community because it is Hinduism which has brought this caste characteristics. And in fact, the whole idea of India as a nation does not. So India is a segmented community according to Ambedkar, okay? Then comes the radical humanists. So they have a more prescriptive approach, and they say that the Indian nationalist movement has a very cosmopolitan characteristics, and it is seeking changes at the philosophical level and eventually progressing towards the idea of integrated world, integrated community, okay? So there is no great perspective, but the underlying basis of freedom, rationality, morality that has been in the philosophy of radical humanism is the way how they have even perceived the Indian national movement. So it's more prescriptive in characteristics rather than descriptive, okay? So these are the key ideas in the themes that you have to study. And obviously this theme is a little factual because there are certain works, there are certain statements, there are certain names of these scholars, what is their key essence and idea that you will have to study, okay? I have comprehensively adjusted in the notes, you can go through. Now let's move to the first question. Elaborate in detail the Marxist perspective on the Indian national movement. Now this question here I have asked it for 20 marks. So if the question is for 10 marks, answer will vary a bit, where we will not speak about Marxist criticism in detail of the colonial perspective and the nationalist historians. But if it is for 20 marks, then we will have to highlight both. Now firstly, you will have to talk about, okay, the nature of Indian national movement and how it remains contested amongst various schools of thought. Then you say that the Marxist perspective has been very critical, okay, and it has been critical of both, critical of the colonial perspective because the colonial outlook was very discriminatory towards the Indian society, and the nationalist historians because they have traced the greatness of India to the past and they have not highlighted the class characteristics, okay, the class-based nature of the Indian national movement. So Marxist perspective has been critical towards both these outlooks. And even within the Marxist perspective, there is no universality, okay? It's like a meta-ideology, and it is a meta-ideology in that sense, that's why it is said that Marxist perspective is not monolithic in characteristics. Monolithic in characteristics, okay? Fine, is this much understood? Now, so let's understand what has been the key idea. So conventional Marxist analysis obviously looks at anything from which framework? From the conventional Marxist analysis looks at anything from the class-based as well as economic determinism. That economic determinism all right? Now, fine. So then let's see who are the key scholars in this regard. So we have R.P. Dutt, we have A.R. Desai, and we have M.N. Roy also. M.N. Roy. One school of thought is this. So they adopt the perspective that how Congress, Gandhi, the bourgeois class have exploited the masses, and how at every different phase of the movement, the movement has had class characteristics. So like A.R. Desai divides the Indian national movement in 5 stages from 1885 until the independence time, and he says that at different phases, he divides them in 5 phases, that at different phases, different class have been associated with the movement, okay? M.N. Roy, on the other hand, adopts what kind of framework? So he adopts a universalist framework. And when he adopts a universalist framework, he says that the Indian national movement is coinciding within the whole framework of global capitalism, and whatever characteristics that you are seeing in India are very peculiar, that actually develop in the phase-wise development of the global capitalism. So all the characteristics that come into countries have already, we can see it clearly in India. And he is very critical of the Congress, he is very critical of Gandhi as a bourgeois leader, all right? R.P. Dutt also is making huge criticism that how the Congress and what do we say, leaders, they have been influenced by their classes and they are working in that direction. A.R. Desai says different time, different phases of the movement have been dominated by different classes. Okay, just note down certain details that I will be telling. It's very important now. So first idea, that just write down, what does A.R. Desai classify the movements as? So he classifies the movements in 5 phases. The first phase is from 1885 to, until 1885, first phase. In this, he says it is the modern intelligentsia which has dominated the movement, okay? The second phase is from 1885 to 1905, and it is in this phase from 1885 to 1905, a bourgeois class has emerged, and it is, in the earlier it is the intelligentsia. In this period it is the bourgeois class, which comprises of the merchant class, the industrialist class, right, who have influenced the nature of the Indian national movement. The third phase from 1905 to 1918. Okay, so the movement has acquired a broader social base at this point of time, and also included the lower middle class. Third phase from which phase? From 1905 to 1918. Then comes the fourth phase. This phase is from 1919 to 1934. Okay, so here the middle class has come into play. The role of the social classes has also increased very much. Upper and middle classes come into being. Okay. And leadership, however, of the Congress remains in the hands of the capitalist class, says A.R. Desai. Then we have the fifth phase from 1934 to 39, and here there is the rise of the Congress socialist. So he divides this into 5 different phases and explains a class-based nature of the Indian national movement. Then we have R.P. Dutt. Okay, so he is largely talking on the nature of the Congress. Okay. All right, and he says that initially it was very loyal to the British, the Congress, and over a period of time it has abandoned this loyalist character towards the British, and it became a strong anti-colonial force. So Congress was not since the beginning very anti-colonial in nature in that sense. Okay, now the next view, we already studied the view of M.N. Roy. So first perspective within Marxist framework is by these 3 scholars. Now there is a change in the perspective, and these scholars who bring in the change in the perspective firstly criticize this conventional Marxist historical analysis and class-based characteristics. So this okay, so change in perspective within Marxist framework comes with the idea of Bipin Chandra and who? Sumit Sarkar. And what do they say? So they say that to criticize all the leaders and to say that never the spirit of consciousness existed amongst the people, and all leaders were influenced and shaping the interest of the classes from which they belonged is wrong. Okay, there was certain extent of sacrifice and other things, and everything cannot be associated with the class characteristic. Means you cannot say that Gandhi was representing the bourgeois class and only advancing their interest. Okay, why he says so? So Bipin Chandra says that leaders and others, okay, they are like intellectuals, and intellectuals work on the basis of ideas. So ideas also have played a key role, and these ideas are not necessarily shaped by the classes from which these leaders belong to. Okay, so Bipin Chandra and others, they point that what is the nature of the intellectuals who have participated in the Indian national movement. So the intellectuals have been traditional intellectuals, which means yes, that they have spoken for the anti-colonial forces, they have spoken for the interest of the society, but they are not necessarily organic intellectuals. Not all are organic intellectual, which means they are not associated with the specialized task of production. They are articulating the ideological aspirations. So the leaders have been more traditional intellectuals rather than organic intellectual, which means representing only the interest of the classes to which they belong. This has not been the case, okay? So we can say yes, Bipin Chandra in a way is trying to give the autonomy of ideas like Gramsci, all right, which also shape the nature of the movement. This is key with respect to the Marxist perspective. Fine, you can note down that even Sumit Sarkar in his work says that giving a simplistic version of the Marxist class approach is, there are defects in assuming this kind of direct and crude economic motivation for action and political ideals of the leaders, okay? Fine, so we'll just take a recap. So you understood that Marxist perspective has been divided into two segments. Now, so in detail, how Indian national movement has been a matter of debate. Okay, it is a historical movement, we know, led to a new political and economic order in India, right? And obviously it was successful in that sense. And Marxists have been critical of both, okay? Of the colonialist as well as the nationalist view. Colonialist because of discriminatory character, and nationalist because they have associated the movement with the historical ancient Indian past. So obviously the Marxist perspective is also not monolithic and it has multiple perspectives in it. So the key basis is the conventional Marxist analysis that has used class-based character, exploitative character and crude economic determinism. Fine, and Karl Marx also had said about Asiatic societies, this is also something you can mention, okay? M.N. Roy, he is giving a universalist perspective. I already spoke about this, okay? That the Indian national movement has developed within the global capitalism, all right? Then R.P. Dutt comes into picture, okay? And how he talks about that, you know, under the guidance of the British governmental policy that the Congress was working. Only later on it became a strong anti-colonial force. Earlier it was tied to the British character, all right? A.R. Desai talks about the 5 phases from 1885 to 1939. Divide these 5 phases and key class in each phase. You can mention it if it comes for 20 marks. If it is only a 10-mark question, then you can reduce your wordings, okay? Then the Bipin Chandra, he brings in a change and he says certain autonomy must be given to the ideas as a vehicle of action and change, right? Then you can give Sumit Sarkar's view and he says that the intellectuals are not necessarily organic intellectuals, they are traditional intellectuals, okay? Now, so let's see the next movement, next question, sorry. Question 2 is, national movement in India was anti-imperialist and increasingly radical in its socio-economic and political program. Now you need to understand that when we talk of the colonial historians, what is it that they are saying? So they are saying that India is not a, there is no idea of India as a nation. And they say whatever the British is doing is a instrument for the progress. So British force, the colonial force is like a instrument through which the intended path of India, okay, is going to happen, right? And they give an instrumentalist perspective in this sense. The British force is the instrument. So what is British doing? British is doing benevolent despotism. Benevolent, which means अगर ये नहीं करेंगे तो कोई भला होना ही नहीं है. It is the providential mission, okay, given by God, and they are coming and doing this, right? So colonial perspective in this way is instrumentalist perspective. Marxist instrumentalist perspective is different, okay? Then come the nationalist historians. अब ये जो nationalist historians है ना, इनके बीच में थोड़ा सा different ideas है. Now they are adopting more of an idea-centric approach. Idea-centric approach. What do you mean by idea-centric? Which means you see that there are different works of the same historian, and in different works they are giving different ideas. about the great ancient past of India, about the nature of the British rule, and it has always changed over time. Okay, their views have also been modified. So you don't find any unified perspective like that within the nationalists. So they are more idea-based. Different historians give different ideas in different works. Okay, now let's come back to the question. So firstly, the question has been reading that Indian national movement is anti-imperialist in character and radical in its socio-economic and political program discuss. So firstly, we have to, whenever we have to give any view, the context will always be first the colonial view. So what is the colonial view saying? Okay, we have Valentine Shirol, we have Herbert Risley, John Strachey, John Seeley, okay? Right? These are the scholars who are giving the colonialist perspective. And obviously they say that India is a land of hostile and warring units. There is no idea of India as a nation. There is disunity, fragmentation. They have never come together. There is infighting amongst the different Indian kings. All right? So they say India is more a conglomeration that is of various religious, ethnic, linguistic, and regional groups. To criticize this, okay, then comes the what? Nationalist historians' perspective. Okay? So this question actually, if you analyze, anti-imperialist and radical in its socio-economic and political program. So you have to talk about all the perspectives, okay, right? Which means the contest that has been there between the colonial historians, the nationalist historians, as well as the Marxist historians, Marxist perspective. All of them are saying different things about the national movement. This is what the underlying theme of the question is, okay? So this might appear to be radical in its socio-economic program and political program, and then you might think that this is only either the Marxist perspective only. No, it is actually how these schools are contesting amongst themselves. These perspectives are contesting. Or some are saying, no, it is not anti-imperialist. Others are saying, no, it is anti-imperialist. This contest has to be shown. Okay, so first we talk about the colonial historians, then we talk about the nationalist historians. In nationalist historian, the moderate nationalist, the extremist nationalist, all right? Then we come to the Marxist perspective, and they say how it has been differently viewed, okay? So A.R. Desai, R.P. Dutt, M.N. Roy, others. And then you can conclude it with the view of Bipin Chandra. So he says that it is the largest movement which achieved its desired objectives through peaceful means. The values of INM and its inclusive nature laid a foundation for India in the post-independent period. And different perspectives give us different views and understanding of the Indian national movement, okay? So this question has to be viewed in this light. Understood? Fine. So I think we have holistically covered this particular topic. Thank you so much. All the best.